Hello and welcome to News in Depth on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. As the EU renews its promise to bring the Western Balkans closer to membership, doubts remain over whether Brussels will finally deliver or once again move the goalposts. At the same time, Poland and Lithuania have opened a key stretch of Via Baltica, a project uniting the Baltic and Central European regions economically and militarily. What do these developments mean for European enlargement, security and cohesion? Well, joining me is Stuart Dowell, political editor at TVP World. Stuart, great to have you back.
Good to be here.
Welcome. So let's start with the Balkans. What's going on? What's renewed this push for these 6 Balkan countries to join the EU?
Well, the accession of the Western Balkans 6, as they're referred to, has always felt like a big waiting room for those countries down there. And accession in the European Union has since forever been a kind of technocratic, meritocratic process where the EU set up all the rules and just wait and see if the candidate members can fulfil those rules. And it's a very painstaking and arduous process. But since Russia's invasion 2022, accession down there, and of course in Moldova and even possibly Ukraine, has become a defence issue, a security issue. The European Union's attitude to those Balkan countries has changed in the sense that it wants to get those countries into its kind of security, under its security umbrella, and that's the reason for the...
Okay, but not all 6 of these are the same, are they? They're moving at different speeds towards EU accession. They have their own internal problems. Serbia, for example, has been facing protests, demonstrations for over a year now. And the same thing with relationships with Putin and Russia. How is the EU kind of managing the multi-speed process for all 6? Because they aren't at the same place, are they?
No, there's not. There's a lot of differentiation down there, and it's treating each of those countries separately. Each country is at a different stage of starting negotiations, opening the chapters as they call them, the bundles. In Serbia's case, you're right that they were going along quite nicely, even under President Vučić, and that was until the war. And the particular kind of sticking point for the EU was that Serbia didn't adopt sanctions against Russia. And the EU actually measure alignment with its own security and foreign policy and give a percentage score. At the moment, Serbia has an alignment of 61%, and that's a big sticking point. In other countries like Montenegro, Albania, they're almost fully aligned on security and foreign policy issues, so their processes are going much better.
How interesting. The other area, of course, apart from the alignment, is the corruption. And that's what the demonstrations have been about, corruption in government. How much of that, how much is corruption a sticking point for Serbia and other countries?
Well, I mean, we have to be honest that in that part of Europe, corruption has always been a problem, and the European Union recognise it. And it applies what it calls conditionality mechanisms, that each of those countries have to deal properly with the problem of corruption and all the other problems that exist by, for example, establishing anti-corruption bodies, law enforcement mechanisms that can deal with corruption. Having independent courts is a big deal for the EU.
And how well are these countries doing on that score?
It varies across the region, but for example in Montenegro are doing reasonably well with it. Albania, which traditionally in the public awareness has had a big problem with corruption, is even doing well with it. Yeah.
Okay. Now the other country of the Balkan 6 that struck me was North Macedonia. I mean, here they've changed their name so that they became more aligned with EU demands for accession. and now the EU is demanding even more.
Yeah, that's right. Now, you're right, they changed their name, which is a big deal for them. So Greece and partly Bulgaria were satisfied by that. But the Bulgarians say that there's a Bulgarian minority in North Macedonia, and they've lobbied to the EU that the Bulgarian minority have to be recognised in their constitution. It's always a big deal to change your constitution. And the North Macedonian government are willing to do that, but the opposition is stopping. They also have their parliamentary thresholds for passing those kind of constitutional amendments. So that's what's holding them back. North Macedonia is a sad tale, really, because they were, I believe, the first of those countries down there to be accepted as a candidate country, and that was back in 2005. So they've had 20 years of kind of being kept in the waiting room, and their prime minister, or former prime minister, I believe, said that it's the Albanian prime minister, but it applies to North Macedonia, that being invited to join the EU is like being invited to dinner, and then the first course never arrives.
Right. Well, one can understand it, as you say, 20 years, in the waiting room, and nothing's going on. Whereas countries like Ukraine and Moldova, they seem to be in the news all the time, and talk of accession to the European Union seems fairly well advanced for both of them. I mean, a few considerations aside. Now, in this period of uncertainty in the region, how much of an opportunity is there for countries like Russia and China to influence what goes on and to take political control, or more political control?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question. This is the concern of the EU, that in a vacuum, that vacuum will be filled by other powers. And with Russia, it's through a gas pipeline, particularly Turk Stream. The Western Balkan countries still buy a lot of gas from Russia, particularly Serbia, but also the other ones. And they're very concerned about the EU's decision to stop gas purchases at the end of, I think, at the end of 2006 into 27.
27, yeah.
So sure, a big problem for them, but their influence also comes through the media, with their Sputnik media in Serbia, with the Orthodox Church in Serbia as well, and of course with what we know about hybrid type activities. And also funding nationalist minority political parties to cause trouble. With China, on the other hand, it's economic, through lending large sums of money for those countries for infrastructure projects, but it gives them leverage and also good PR. For example, in Montenegro, they built their motorway network with 1 billion euros of Chinese money, a loan that's caused them a lot of problems. And also in Serbia, the Chinese have funded, I believe, a tyre plant. There's some other large factory that the Chinese have funded. So it comes in a different form with the Chinese.
But that's pretty standard for the Chinese playbook. They've done that throughout Africa and Asia, where they funded infrastructure projects to gain influence. So we're watching that space, and let's hope things move quickly, certainly for the countries in the West Balkans. Moving on now to the Via Baltica, a partnership between Poland and Lithuania. Mm-hmm. I've got a short soundbite I'd like us to have a look at, and then I'll take your view on it.
That's really, from security point of view, from the point of view of military mobility, it's essential, because the security of the Baltic states, not just of Lithuania, but also of Latvia and Estonia, depends on NATO's ability to transport troops and heavy equipment in a speedy, quick and efficient manner to the area of conflict. And that's why it's so important. The same thing is for roads, and of course this expressway, which now leads from Lisbon to Kaunas, the former Lithuanian capital, is a huge improvement.
It has to go through what's called the Suwałki Gap.
It has to go through Suwałki Gap.
A choke point. Is there military cooperation in NATO as to how to defend that just a few kilometres between Kaliningrad and Belarus in times of war?
Well, that's really NATO's focus these days. I mean, it's clear that that's the most vulnerable place. because that's what divides part of Russia called the Kaliningrad enclave, which formerly was part of Germany, and the rest of the Russian homeland and Belarus, which is really a dependent territory on Russia, is just a very thin stripe. So obviously the first thing which, if we have a Russian aggression, the Russians would want to do was to cut out that stripe, to connect Kaliningrad, which is heavily militarized part of the of Russia, with the rest of the
cut off the Baltics.
Exactly.
A lot to unpack in that, Stuart. So Via Baltica, a joint project between Lithuania and Poland, a connection really all the way through to Western Europe, with economic and military benefits. Let's start with the military benefits. How does that help this region and the Baltic states?
Well, it's a big help. Military mobility is a big deal in NATO, and European Union even have a special funding program, military mobility, because any military person will get that. And as Marcin was saying on the clip, it's going to be a way to transport very quickly the even heavy military equipment and soldiers through that gap in times of uncertainty. It's worth underlining, it's worth mentioning for viewers that the part of the road that was opened was the connecting section from southern Lithuania up to its own border. The section in Poland from Warsaw up to its border with Lithuania has been open for some time, but the Lithuanians still need to build it up to its border in the north and then onto Latvia and then later into Estonia. But I think of more military application and usefulness is the Rail Baltica project, which follows a similar path, but you can simply get more stuff on a train. The designers of the Rail Baltica say that on a 40 carriage rail setup, you can get as much equipment as you can on a 7-kilometre road convoy. It's astonishing, really, and that's going to help. For example, the Germans, where they have they're setting up their forward base in Lithuania. I think it's going to be fully manned, brigade size of up to 5,000 soldiers around 2027. But with a rail link, you can fit all the heavy equipment that a 5,000 brigade needs overnight from Berlin to that region. In the past, without that rail link, it can take days.
Indeed. Or you'd have to rely on air transport, which of course has its own limitations. Now, we heard about the Suwałki Gap. Talk us through what that is and why it is has been always considered a weakness for NATO.
Yeah, it's the short 65-kilometre gap between Belarus and Russia's exclave Kaliningrad. Belarus is a kind of dominated territory by Russia, and Russia certainly has war plans to close that gap from both sides. Kaliningrad is bristling with Russian weapons, and then it would cut the Baltics off from NATO.
From the rest of NATO. Yeah. And so this road would allow a connection between the Baltics and the rest of NATO and Europe, which would therefore strengthen its position and protect the Suwałki Gap. Well, that sounds all great and proper. Who's paying for it?
Well, the European Union is paying for a lot of it. You mean the road?
Yeah, the road, the railways.
A lot of funding coming from the European Union, a smaller amount from the governments on the territories in which parts of those projects are being built.
Okay, now economically speaking, how does it help the region, Central and Eastern Europe?
It binds it together. Big roads and transport projects help trade. We know that. And it'll. I think one of the benefits is that it'll stop the Baltics from being this kind of periphery. It'll knit them much more closely to Central Europe, which is good for economics, but also can have strong political changes.
Well, yes, you talk about political changes, you talk about alliances. I mean, Poland and Lithuania have a very old alliance. Polish President Nawrocki spoke of centuries of trust and unity. So what is this, the historical foundation, if you like, for the partnership between these two countries?
Well, it's interesting that Poland and Lithuania's cooperation as states goes back to the 14th century, when they felt threatened by the Teutonic and the Livonian Knights, and later by Muscovy, which then became Tsarist Russia. And the Poland exported its Catholicism as well to Lithuania, and that this part of the world was regarded as a kind of bridgehead of Latin Christendom. And now with the defence cooperation, and probably here it's worth pointing out that Lithuania plans to spend over 5% of its GDP on defence. We know that Poland is around 5%. So taking those things together, the renewed Polish-Lithuanian commonwealth of defence, I call it, it's not its official name, makes Poland and Lithuania a kind of bridgehead of Western security.
Yes, and of course Baltic security as well. Now, in terms of the European Union, what does this tell you about the European Union's investment, if you like, into greater connection between EU countries, strategically speaking?
What does it say? That it's important, like we were saying before, that military mobility is very important.
Because the EU has a challenge, doesn't it, with unified decision making, for example. Decisions are taken very, very slowly. Will projects like this, strategic projects which bind EU countries more closely together, hopefully speed up the process of decision making and taking action, which most people agree when it comes to supporting Ukraine? Action's been slow in coming.
Well, I'm not really sure that building the road is going to speed up EU
No, but it builds up relationships, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure. I think that what's interesting at the moment, going back to our discussion on the Western Balkans, is that EU enlargement is a problem for a lot of European Union members, because those countries bring with them their own potential vetoes. And that's the thing that can slow down decision making, as we see with Hungary. And the current proposal that they're thinking about in Brussels is to allow new members in, but not give them the veto right, as a way to give the benefits of membership to the new members, but not to kind of seize up the engine of decision making. So,
which of course the Balkan countries, if they were to come in, would complain about, because they'd say, well, you're taking our money, but we have no say in how it's spent.
Well, it's actually the information coming from the Balkans is the opposite to that. I think they're just so keen to get in that that's a compromise that they're quite happy to take. Accept.
Well, we shall certainly be watching. Let's see what happens. Stuart, as always, thank you so much for sharing your analysis.
You're welcome.
With our audience. Brings us to the end of this episode of News in Depth. Don't go away though. Lots more coming up. Bye now.